A presidential convoy drive on Wednesday reveals courts behind the brutality associated with former President Jammeh's road usage. Ethiopian pilots have adopted a new working system due to prevent further spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. And government in Nigeria is compelled to deal with hunger among the poor who have been trapped in the midst of the coronavirus. Well, this and more coming on The World Today. Hello there, this is iAfrica TV and you're watching the World Today News Bulletin. I am Amadou Kante. Many thanks for joining us, and now the news in detail. Now, a former presidential convoy driver testified before the TRC on drone accidents associated with ex-President Jammeh's motorcade. The testimony revealed that all accidents around the presidential convoy were directly reported to the president. Our Makalo has more in this report.
Before the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission on Wednesday was a former presidential driver disclosing courts in the alleged brutal motorcade under ex-president Yahya Jammeh. Lamin Seydi Khan appeared in execution of the commission's mandate to document evidence of unlawful attacks against road users by movement of the then president. The former State House driver, who described the constituents of delegates in a presidential convoy, referred to what he called the highway sweepers, commanders' vehicles, and those of the VIPs. As usual, the heavily militarized convoy under the former President Yahya Jammeh would have carriers of personal belongings of the president.
Sweeper intambira dal commander katara moto men kono commander wala katara sweeper noma.
After the sweepers pass, the next vehicle following is usually the one that would have the commander in it.
Which commander are you referring to?
State Guard Commander.
The State Guard Commander.
Please go ahead.
After that, plainclothes la moto itara onoma.
After that, the vehicle of the plainclothes will follow.
After the VIP moto wate ex Jammeh la moto itara onoma plainclothes noma.
And then the ex-president's vehicle will follow that of the plainclothes.
Back of a plainclothes le katara over back ala moto koma plainclothes le kona katara kala moto la tema.
Behind his vehicle is also another vehicle containing plainclothes officers, so that his vehicle is in the middle.
So after that, ara reserve for ina bula auto kono do reserve la or reserve sava. And the personal belongings.
After that, you had his reserves either to a vehicle or two vehicles that would carry his personal belongings.
The RRC witness, Seydi Khan, was recruited in the army in the 90s and as a convoy driver under the governance of Jammeh, who he said was in charge of the speed at which the motorcade was always to go. All this aside, presidential movements were punctuated with arbitrary use of the road in a warlike scenario, leading to the death of civilians and even members of the security forces.
I
was in there, but I know the boy, he lost control as they were coming from Kanilai.
So what the father instant.
Their vehicle fell off, somersaulted, and he died instantly.
And who is this?
Fodelam is a civilian driver. President Jammeh reserve motor Burundi, one of the reserve motor la Burundi.
He was Fode, a civilian driver who drove one of Jammeh's reserved vehicles.
And do you know what was the reason why he lost control of the vehicle and it somersaulted and he died?
Fo isalo no le bam dalile mujumale ya sabu abe moto memburundi kawonya fo moto nata boy ate fe fata je.
Sometimes, convoy drivers were jailed for even slight mistakes, making sitters on the wheels very worried once they are at work with the president.
But they were not prepared to accept the position, I think they might have been afraid.
Can you tell us what they were afraid of?
Afanye ngitela miroto mune silandi
yalo ngado je kan ne posono do kan ko ko sitara no je le kan sago now place like Opalaso is very important because any movement of the convoy so you get contact so nim dilans kita anything to them then anything be jetele penalty tala kan has.
Well, you know, during those days, when we were in that position, especially that position, which was very important, anything can happen to you. For instance, if you are called on a convoy and there's a delay, they could you could have a serious reprimand for such.
Can you just speak directly, Mr. Sirikan, and just tell us what people were fearful of holding that particular position? What was so sensitive about it?
Laso ni memba ko yin noma akade dia munye dro ya fonye ya senendi mune ya kendi mulu sileta purka o palaso ta ya foko ko men ka kela mun ku fo son la mune se keno ila pour je senendi ni dro
dismissal sita no jele
you could be dismissed,
then si sorondo sita no jele
you could be imprisoned.
The president in the Gambia is constitutionally obliged to complete a nationwide tour, better known as Meet the People Tour, at least once every year. The frequency of this movement across the country could increase, especially during election seasons, where a re-elected campaign becomes the season. For iAfrica TV News, Aoma Kalu.
And from the report there from the TRC hearing, next we, of course, move to Ethiopia, where aviation industries around the world are working on modalities to resume passenger flight, as other operators are now engaged in cargo transportation. Ethiopian pilots responsible for supply of medical aid in different countries have adopted the new working system brought about by the impact of the COVID-19 global pandemic. Here is more details of that in this report.
It is late afternoon at Addis Ababa Bole International Airport in Ethiopia. Captain Zena Brahanu is checking over this 777 freighter plane before heading to China. Flying during the coronavirus pandemic requires additional safety measures for Captain Zena and his crew, even when they are not on duty.
The daily routines, for example, today we'll go to Guangzhou. When we reach Guangzhou, what they do is they do a medical test for us to see if we have that COVID virus. So they just do the checkup. If they find something, they will quarantine you there. So we'll go through a medical checkup. It takes about 1 hour.
Raju Abdul Samad has been working at Ethiopian Airlines for the past 4 years as a first officer. He says the pandemic has changed the way he works and lives.
Once I get to my home, I will remove my clothes and put it in a separate place, then take a warm shower, and then I will isolate myself with a room.
These pilots are responsible for transporting medical aid to the humanitarian hub opened at the airport to respond to the pandemic. And the supplies they deliver include medical aid from countries like China to various African nations. Many airlines are still working out how to responsibly restart passenger flights, so pilots are predominantly in charge of cargo planes, and they are risking their lives to keep supply chains running and deliver essential medical supplies. Many call them everyday heroes, helping the world triumph over the coronavirus.
That report there was done in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. And from that, next we head to Brazil, because the Brazilian army has joined the fray to help contain the spread of the COVID-19, as the president has tested positive of the virus. The country's head of state had played down the severity of the pandemic in his country, but now he is under treatment, or is ongoing under treatment for the virus. Here's more details of that in this report.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro announced at a press conference on Tuesday that he has tested positive for the coronavirus. The 65-year-old president has frequently played down the threat of the pandemic in his country, but said he is in a good condition as he breaks the news to the press. He explained that the symptoms began with a brief disposition and worsened on Monday with discomfort, tiredness, and a high fever of 38 degrees that led him to conduct a test. As part of efforts to contain the spread of the virus, the country's military has begun a disinfection exercise at the TT bus terminal in Sao Paulo on Tuesday morning. The Sao Paulo's primary bus station is the largest on its content and the second largest in the world. The army deployed a second team for the disinfection of the 120,000 square meter space, where 90,000 passengers and 3,000 buses passed through daily. The state of Sao Paulo has had over 323,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus and at least 16,000 deaths with the disease since the beginning of the pandemic, according to a data released by the State Health Secretariat on Monday. Brazil has suffered the world's second highest recorded number of COVID-19 cases and related deaths since the start of the pandemic. Reporting for Africa News, I am Amadou Kante.
And from the report there, next we come back close to Nigeria because the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has continued to cause more difficulties in access to food among vulnerable groups in Nigeria. The situation, according to the United Nations Food Agency, could be worse than the current realities. The government has provided food package as relief for the affected communities, although more support is needed. Here's more details of that in this report.
Rose Chukwu, a mother of 10, has been struggling to earn a living from her petty trading business. She's one of those whose sources of livelihood have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now she makes an average of $4 daily from selling roasted corn, barely enough to get food for her household.
It's very difficult because sometimes I have to depend on stipends and freebies from strangers. That's how I'm surviving with my children. Especially during the quarantine, people from my son's church donate food for us. Sometimes, when we have nothing to eat, we buy cassava flakes and drink it before bed.
Rice, beans, and groundnut oil and the tomatoes inside. Sometimes I may buy gari half mudu or 2 or 3 cups, then we drink.
The devastating impact of COVID-19 is being felt around the world. The WFP projects that food insecurity could double by the end of the year, so it's eager to increase assistance to the most affected communities. But it will cost the WFP about $4.9 billion to sustain this huge increase of people in need of support that shot up from last year's 97 million people.
Well, the COVID pandemic is creating a hunger pandemic. In fact, we've gone from now 135 million people on the brink of starvation to 270 million people. And while we've got to have a vaccine for COVID, we do have a vaccine for hunger and starvation, and that's the World Food Program. So we need support right now, and if we don't get that support, you can imagine death rates, starvation, mass migration by necessity, and exploitation by extremists.
The impact had long been felt in Nigeria before the coronavirus outbreak. The Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that about 7 million people will experience food shortage across 13 states. That situation has been worsened by the Boko Haram insurgency and continuing conflict between farmers and herders. But the figures, exacerbated by COVID-19, a rapid
intervention that is needed at the moment is for government to have a state of emergency in agriculture. It's very, very, very key and important. Now, agriculture should be a grassroots topic. Everybody needs to have a food bank.
Food prices are on the rise, far beyond the reach of a majority like Rose, whose incomes have been cut off or reduced significantly. The Nigerian government introduced its stimulus package to help households and small businesses hardest hit by the adverse impact of the coronavirus pandemic. But many say they are yet to benefit from that assistance.
The COVID-19 global pandemic continues to cause food shortages in vulnerable communities in Nigeria. And with that, we will now take a break and come back shortly with the remaining of the story. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You are watching the World Today News Bulletin on Africa TV, and now to the rest of the stories. Now, the World Health Organization has on Tuesday debunked claims by a group of scientists that the COVID-19 is transmissible through air. In an open letter some time ago, the experts said they maintain their stance that the virus is transmitted through droplets expelled by an infected person and inhaled by another. The WHO commits to conduct a further investigation on the matter. Details of that in this report by Sona Tunkara.
WHO's technical lead on infection prevention and control Hope and Task Force, Professor Bendata, dispelled claims by a group of scientists that the coronavirus is an airborne disease.
And therefore, the possibility of airborne transmission in public settings, especially in very specific conditions, crowded, closed, poorly ventilated settings that have been described, cannot be ruled out. However, the evidence needs to be gathered and interpreted, and we continue to support this.
As the novel coronavirus cases continue to escalate in different parts of the globe, it is yet to reach the worst stage, despite a death toll of over 535,000, according to the World Health Governing Body. More than 400,000 new cases of the COVID-19 were recorded within the past 3 months across the globe. Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director of WHO's Health Emergencies Program, said more deaths are expected.
We may see that, so I don't think it should be a surprise if the deaths start to rise again. It would be very unfortunate, but it may happen.
A team of experts is expected in China this weekend in a mission to unearth the zoonosis and origin of COVID-19. WHO Director Dr. Tedros said the team will work collectively with their Chinese counterparts during the mission.
The mission objective is to advance the understanding of animal hosts for COVID-19 and ascertain how the disease jumped between animals and humans.
The coronavirus surge has greatly affected the global response to other diseases, such as the HIV. Response treatment of HIV has tremendously dropped, with 73 countries reporting shortage of the antiretroviral medicine. For iAfrica TV, Sohna Tunkara.
And from the report on matters of the WHO, next we head to South Sudan, where South Sudanese traffic police officer got rewarded for his hard work in serving public interest as per his mandate on traffic duties. The public usually decry of harassment and bribery from police officers, but all that became history when George Kennedy was transferred to the traffic department. His effort was hailed by residents in Juba and his senior officers as a way of inspiring others to emulate his hard work. Here's more details of that.
George Kennedy joined South Sudan's police service 10 years ago. The 32-year-old's first assignment was as in the security forces, which involved moving from one town to another. Recently, Kennedy was transferred to the traffic department. Members of the public have complained of harassment and extortion by some traffic officers who they say demand bribes. George Kennedy is determined to be different and show the public a new face to South Sudan's traffic police, working long hours, sometimes in rain, earning a salary of about $15 a month, but he says keeping people safe makes him happy.
My bosses taught me that wherever I am, whether in the office or on the road, I have to obey the law. That's simply what I'm doing. I think I'm not special, but I don't take bribes. I don't want to waste people's time on the road. I want everyone to know that it's our duty to build this country. All of us should work and move the country forward.
Noticing George Kennedy's dedication to work, Juba residents launched a campaign to donate to him. It has resulted in contribution of over $1,500, as well as a plot of land, a car, and household items.
This is the South Sudan we want. We need to capitalize on positive aspects, and all of us should start this as a new footing, as a new path, as a new image of this beloved country. Together we shall make South Sudan great again.
It's our prayer that Kenya will continue working hard for the benefit of this country.
He's always put his life at stake for the benefit of everyone in this country.
George says the contributions from Juba residents have motivated him to do his job even better. His bosses in the police have also noted his hard work.
We have already submitted Kenyi's name to President Salva Kiir for promotion. We proposed that he be promoted to the rank of First Lieutenant.
George Kenyi says he wakes up every morning knowing the day will be a challenge, but that hasn't stopped him. Juba residents say they hope that what they have contributed to Kenyi will motivate other men and women in uniform to perform their duties diligently.
Inspiring story there in South Sudan, Juba, that is the capital. Now, the African Development Banks project the number of confirmed cases of the COVID-19 in the continent to cause serious economic bearing on the life of the people. In the African Economic Outlook Report 2020, the bank put into account the limited testing qualities in most countries. My colleague Julden Yaesware earlier looked at the details of the report.
Since its inception from Wuhan, China, the coronavirus global pandemic has caused an unprecedented challenge to economics worldwide, with Africa probably the most hit continent. Africa's premier development bank released the African Economic Outlook, a 116-page report analyzing the impact of COVID-19 in detail. In the area of growth, Africa's economic growth is expected to rebound to 3% in the post-COVID-19 pandemic in 2021 from a negative 3.4% in the worst-case scenario for 2020. According to the updated forecast from the African Development Bank on Tuesday, Africa's economic growth could rebound provided that governments manage very well the rate of COVID-19 infection. The bank further stated that governments and development partners must respond in a more coordinated and rapid manner to be effective in the limiting of the COVID-19 pandemic. On the rate of poverty, additional 49 million Africans could be pushed into extreme poverty by the pandemic and its aftermath, according to the official projections. West and Central Africa will have higher concentrations of people falling into poverty from the pandemic. Extreme poverty is expected to increase in West Africa by 3.2% compared with the previous COVID-19. On the area of employment, an estimated 25.30 million jobs could be lost from the job market. Under the baseline scenario of a 1.7% GDP concentration, employment is projected to decline by 24.6 million jobs in 2020. The impact will be mostly felt by the working poor, who account for almost half of the employed. Of course, remittances and foreign direct investment. This has become for many African economics more than 10% of the GDP for Cape Verde, Morocco, Gambia, Liberia, and of course Senegal. These countries have become exceptionally vulnerable to the shocks in remittance caused by COVID-19, especially in high-income economics where migrant jobs and incomes are threatened. Foreign direct investment, which picked up in 2018 by 10.9%, reaching $45.9 billion and about $49 billion in 2019, is also expected to fall.
And that was my colleague Juldenjai Suare there, looking at the details of the African Development Bank's 2020 on the impact of the COVID-19 in Africa. That was quite a very interesting one. And with that, we bring this news bulletin to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, you can also log on our website on iafrica.tv. Well, once again, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Stay safe. Thanks for watching, and bye from me.
Here are 5 ways you can help combat stigma and discrimination as we fight against